about that.
That's fine. Hi, Dina. Thanks for coming. I hope that's how you pronounce your name. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see. There we go. Now your video is the main one. So how's the weather in Arizona?
Arizona is getting hot.
It's pretty chilly here at night still.
It has been okay at night. It cools down into the 50s, even the 40s sometimes. But
Oh, okay. Da, 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 da. I check my calendar right now. I don't know. I need to check my calendar. What event? Send me the information in an email, please. I'm being summoned. Da, 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 da. Let's see. All right, I will be right. Okay, it is now 5 o'clock, so another light on. Shall we go ahead and get started?
you bet.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of our webinar series. And today we are going to be talking about something which has been very popular in the news lately, and that is United Airlines fiasco. So today we have Mark Yfros here, who is a very experienced in the hospitality industry. He's in hotels for many years, Radisson, Sheraton, Embassy Suites, and he has commented on this kind of situation to me many times before, so I thought he'd be the perfect host to talk about it.
Well, let's talk about what happened, and let's talk about what we can learn from that experience. As you probably know, United Airlines on April 9th on a flight from Chicago to Louisville Kentucky, flight 3411, was overbooked. Not normally overbooked by passengers, but the airline at the last minute found out they had 4 employees that needed to be transported to another location on that flight. As a result, 4 paying customers needed to be reaccommodated. That's the term the airline uses. And this was determined, unfortunate for United Airlines, this was determined after they had already boarded the passengers. And that is the mistake that we will talk about that really cost them dearly. So they, as you may or may not know, the airlines are allowed to offer compensation to passengers who are willing to voluntarily give up their seat. And so they started that process. They needed 4 seats. They offered, I don't know where they started, but they ended up at $800 and I think at $800. Some reports say they went as high as $1,000. I'm not sure. But there were no takers. And so nobody voluntarily would give up their seat. So the airline then through some type of computer program randomly selected 4 paying passengers and went onto the flight and informed them that they would have to leave the flight. And you can just imagine, if you were that passenger, how that would feel once you've already been seated, to have the airline come to you and say you need to leave. After you purchased the ticket, made all your travel arrangements, probably have rental cars, hotels, who knows, people waiting for you. Well, 3 passengers reluctantly agreed and left the flight without incident. The 4th passenger, Dr. David Dow, did not. He stated that he was a doctor, that he had patients that had to be seen, he could not miss the flight, and things went from bad to worse. And then we've all seen the video of, it's not funny, but it is. We've seen the video of what ensued after that and how badly he was treated, being drug out of his seat, banged his head on the armrest opposite him, drug out of the plane with other passengers filming on their cell phones and screaming in disgust and could not believe what they were watching. Somehow, once he got off the plane, he broke free, ran back through the plane, and you also can see that video. He was bloodied, injured. Now that a lawyer is involved, he probably has cancer and is terminally ill. But he definitely was injured through the process, as it can be seen on the video. That's the story of what happened. A little background that you may or may not realize is that on an airline like that, once you board and buy that ticket and board a plane, your constitutional rights that are afforded you as a citizen, at least of this country, and I think that's extended to visitors as well, are no longer valid. There's a different set of rules once you board a plane or a boat or a train. And you have to comply with the captain of that vessel or plane. And when they tell you you have to leave, unfortunately, under the law, you have to do that. And so in that sense, he was wrong.
So what you're saying is when we get on an airplane, we're actually leaving America and leaving our constitutional rights behind?
To some extent, yes. You're not leaving America. You're still on American soil. You can be born on an airplane in American airspace and still run for president someday. But you cannot disobey or ignore the orders of the flight crew.
Do you think that anybody will be reluctant to fly because they are now aware of this?
I don't think so. I think it was common knowledge before. It's stated during the safety instructions pretty clearly. And so, whatever. The issue, again, here is that this was a PR nightmare, and we're going to talk about why, because that's what applies to what we're talking about here is what you can learn from this as an applicant or as an employee in a company. The incident occurred, it was filmed by several people, which means it was immediately released to the internet. And the CEO, Oscar Munoz of United Airlines, immediately came out with an apology. And his apology fell very short. He apologized for having to reaccommodate passengers due to his flight crew having to take the seats. He again, reaccommodating passengers, dragging a passenger from a plane bloody is not reaccommodating a passenger under anybody's definition. And so that was his first issue. He said this is an upsetting event, and the jokes out there are, he was upset by this event, seriously? How about those passengers, and how about Dr. Dow? So very short, very poor response in his first attempt. The humorous thing about this, and what I find funny from my knowledge of the whole incident, is Oscar Munoz, the CEO of United Airlines, did a lousy job in response to this incident. And it costs the airline, in the end, over $250 million in stock value. Originally, it was over $1 billion, but they recuperated that the same day. But again, over $250 million has been lost as a result of this. And only a month ago today, Oscar Munoz was awarded Communicator of the Year by PR Week magazine, which is public relations. So they named him as Communicator of the Year in all the businesses in the United States, and this is how he communicated. He did a horrible job. His second attempt at apology went out it was an open letter to the employees of United Airlines, telling them that he was proud of the work they had done and for having gone above and beyond in their job, and he called the passenger disruptive and belligerent.
Oh, wow.
And again, I don't know if this man just woke up, but of course that statement that was only for employees was immediately released to the internet within seconds. And again, strike two. Finally, the following day, I believe, after 2 failed attempts, he owned the problem and sincerely apologized, which was perceived by 99% of the people in the world that he was sorry his company had lost so much stock value. And that was the only reason he was actually doing this. So those were his mistakes. Again, had the airline offered maybe $1,000 per seat, $1,300 per seat, that would have cost them maybe $5,000 instead of $250 million in the end, and a reputation that will not go away anytime soon. And it's interesting, and I think those of you that are on board with us here today, this was a small event on a domestic flight from Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky, which is not even a main flight in the United States. I have flown to almost every airport in the United States, and I have never flown to Louisville, Kentucky. And I probably never will. And yet this topic became the #1 trending topic in Chinese social media.
Yeah.
And I can make my guesses as to why that is. We know that Dr. Dow is Asian. I don't know his nationality. He may be Chinese. I'm not sure. But we do know that United Airlines, currently, their entire business plan is to expand into the Chinese market. And that simply may not happen at this point. They may have burned that bridge before they got to it. So this is going to cost the airline much more than just the $250 million in lost value. So that's the story. What can we learn from it? Well, there's a lot of things to learn from it. It depends where you are in life. But this is the one thing I can tell you is if you're an applicant trying to apply at a company, or if you're an employee of a company, and whatever your situation, or if you're the manager of a company or the owner of a company, when something goes wrong that you are responsible for, something that you have done or that somebody on your team has done, even if it's a subcontractor, as it was in this case, this wasn't even a United flight. It was one of their subcontracted flights because it's not even a United airport. If something goes wrong and you're at fault or involved in your company's at fault, admit that. People make mistakes. And as an applicant, you may go to an interview and you may make a mistake. That is not uncommon. And so you need to expect that. And so it's not the end of the world if you make mistakes. And I'm going to talk to you about some things I've learned on perhaps a way to use that mistake in your favor. So own the problem, take responsibility right away, and timing is key. Here we have the case where the CEO of United Airlines took responsibility, but he did it too late. And he did it late enough that the damage is done and it will not be repaired. Nothing he can say at this point will fix anything that has happened. So own that problem. And thirdly, just remember this: act as if you're always being recorded. So it doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, act as if you're always being recorded. If you're a job applicant and you've posted things on Facebook or on WeChat, I guarantee you any potential employer worth half their weight in value is going to check out your sites, check out your social media, and find out what you are all about. Because it won't come out in the interview, but they can check online and probably know more than they want to know about you and your family and your friends, what your hobbies are, and how you feel about things. So be aware of that. Pretend you're always being filmed, and be aware of your social media. So here's and jump right in there, Angela, if you have some questions, or if anybody else pops up with a question.
Oh, yeah, sure. I forgot to make some announcements at the beginning. So throughout this entire conversation, feel free to raise your hand, or if you would like to ask a question out loud, raise your hand, or go ahead and send a chat message. If you click on the chat key, you will be able to type in a message, and that can be, you can just ask a question that way, and I will read out your question so we can make sure and get your questions answered. So to give you a little bit, Mark has been in human resources for 35 years, so he's got a lot of information as far as, job seeking, resumes, interviewing, and then of course we're talking about this topic. So if anything pops up that you want to ask, go ahead and type that in or raise your hand, and we will definitely take care of that. Okay.
So good. Let's talk about how a mistake can actually help you in the interview process. I was once running a hotel in California. It was a very high-end hotel in a resort destination, and we were at the top of the charts on guest service scores. And that's important in the hotel industry because it measures the return potential of guests. And return, they call guest retention, is a big issue in hotels because if you get loyalty, then you've got a guest for life throughout the entire brand, not just not just in your one hotel that was a one-off. So we were at the top of the charts on our guest service scores, but we felt like there was more we could do. And one of the things I learned at this time was, and if you think about this, this makes perfect sense. If you've ever been to a business, maybe pick a restaurant or somewhere where everything went right and there were no issues, nothing went wrong, everything was good. You came and you went, and was it a memorable experience? Maybe, but most likely it was not memorable. And what you want when you're performing guest service is to do something that will stand out in people's minds, something that will allow people to remember that you were above and beyond. So we devised a method, a plan to actually start making mistakes that would affect the guest's stay, but not in a horrible way, just small things. And then we had the opportunity to follow up with that guest and have a moment of truth, as we called it, to actually provide service that was memorable. So think to another time that you've been somewhere where things went wrong and they handled it very well. You can probably remember right away incidents like that where customer service was outstanding. And it was probably related to a problem. So here you are now in an interview. And so you have a problem. You answer a question wrong, or you can clearly see that the interviewer is not happy or bored or whatever else. What do? Well, you correct it as quickly as possible before it gets firmed up in the person's mind. You make sure that you can clarify. You need to think clearly. Don't get defensive. Even if you think you're being misrepresented in the interview. Don't get defensive, but take the opportunity to correct and clarify the situation right away. What's going to happen if there's a problem, and I'm not suggesting create a problem like we did at our hotel, but there will be problems. So when that happens, take that opportunity and see it as a plus. See it as an opportunity to stand out in that interviewer's mind, because there's a problem and you fixed it immediately. No interviewer on the planet is going to want to interview a candidate who is perfect. They don't exist. And the ones that do, I can tell you, are fake. I've interviewed thousands of people, and the ones that come across with the right answer every time, I don't hire, because they've read too many websites, they've read all the books, they know too well what the answer should be, and they're telling me what I want to hear. And what I want to know is, what are they all about, and what are we all about, and do the two fit together? So if there's a mistake or a problem that occurs during the interview, it's really a bonus for you, as long as you handle it correctly. And I got to tell you a story, and it's good to tell stories about yourself. I once applied for an executive position with a hotel company and had an extensive interview in fact, this person actually had my wife come along to the interview and was asking her questions.
I don't know if that's legal anymore.
I don't know if that's legal, but it was interesting. But the end result was, he told me in the interview that I was too vanilla, meaning I was boring. There was not my answers were too generic, and I was telling him what I thought he wanted to hear. And so that was an example of a bad interview that I had to correct as quickly as possible. And I said, okay, you don't want vanilla? Let me spice it up a little bit. And I threw some things in, stories about my background and my experience that were more interesting to him and more dynamic. And so the interview turned. I did not get the job, but the interview turned as a result of that. And so again, it was an opportunity and almost a bad interview, but it turned out good, I think. So do we have any questions?
We do. We actually do have a question here. Okay. Why asked, I heard there is a lawsuit against United Airlines. What do you think the result will be?
Well, I think there will be a settlement out of court, and that the result will be sealed and no one will ever know that Dr. Yao will be paid some money. But it's not because he was taken off the plane. They acted completely legally in that nature. As rough as it was to watch, everything was legal. But he was injured. They did not exercise caution. And so my guess is the lawsuit will not be necessarily against the airline. It might be against the police, the airport security police that were there. So it's hard to say because it's not legal to beat somebody up. They're going to claim that it was out of resistance, that he was fighting them, but they didn't need to be that rough. And again, had they made this offer to the people on the plane before they ever boarded, there would have been a lot easier process. And then you can deny somebody a seat without bloodying them, rather than letting them on a plane and then dragging them off in front of everybody else. So yes, there is a lawsuit. He has a good attorney, a personal injury lawyer, and I'm sure they will go for blood.
Now we have another question, and that is, I'm curious why they didn't admit the mistake at the very beginning.
That is a really good question. A lot of people are not sure why, and I don't know. I can't step into the mind of Oscar Munoz, but my guess is he thought it was going to be something small, and he had no idea that there was video taken, and that video would be posted to the internet, and that the reaction would be as strong as it was. And again, video changes everything. From a public relations standpoint, if you're ever an owner of a company or a manager of a company, you have to understand video changes everything. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what the truth is. Video says everything.
True.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a couple other people come in, so I'll go back and kind of do a recap. So we're basically talking about the United Airlines fiasco and how sometimes when you make a mistake, the most important part is how you react to that mistake. And as we all know, United Airlines did not react very well, and now they are the laughing stock of the country. Maybe not the laughing stock, maybe more everyone's angry at them, of the world, not even just the country, of the whole world. Yeah. And the application here is we all make mistakes. United Airlines probably couldn't control this mistake, but they can control what they did after the mistake. So I just want to bring up an example that could have happened to any of us. Let's say I have an interview at a company scheduled tomorrow morning, and I completely forgot. Is there any way to fix the situation there?
Absolutely. But do it quickly. Do it as soon as you realize it. Make contact, make amends, apologize for the mistake, and make yourself completely available to make up that time, at their convenience in any form, whether it be in person, over the telephone, on the internet. But yeah, you have to be quick, and you have to be honest. People make mistakes, and I want an employee that's going to make a mistake and own up to it. And I think a lot of people respect that.
So you wouldn't recommend, I think my first idea would be to say, I had a relative die, or I lost my keys, or come up with any excuse. But your suggestion would be to be honest?
I would be honest. You don't necessarily have to tell them why you missed the appointment. If you slept in with a hangover, I would not tell them that. But I would be honest to say I completely spaced. I apologize. I have no excuse, but I am guilty. What can I do to make it up? I really, really want to meet with you. So I think you can do that. There are very few people that I know out there that would say, sorry, that's your one chance. You don't get another one. So.
Okay, we've got another question, and this is confusing me already just reading it. So the newspaper reported that United Airlines paid the ticket for all the passengers on the flight. The reason for that is UA wanted the passengers to keep silent. Is that legal? Is that common in the US? And what do you suggest we should do if we entered the same situation?
They did offer to pay. They did refund everybody's flight the following day. The same day that the security personnel were suspended. Again, this was too much, or too little, too late for the airline. I think their attempt was to silence and make sure that the other passengers were on their side. Didn't work. More of them came forward and accused the airline of bribing them. And in the United States, there is no way to shut people up. You can't pay them off and keep them silent. Only a court order can do that, and that certainly is too early for any court orders. And so those passengers went out, they saw an opportunity, a lot of them, and went to the media and got interviewed and made money from the media. So those interviews, you get paid for those interviews. So those people that took video sold those videos, and those people that got interviewed, got paid for those interviews. And so United Airlines failed at keeping any passengers quiet, and it's not legal, and it's not common in the United States. Bribery is common everywhere, but it didn't work, and it didn't work here. If you're in that situation, particularly in the United States, you have every right to speak your mind. You do have limited rights, as we talked about earlier, when you're on an airplane. Saying what you can want to say after the fact, once you're off that plane, is completely your right. We have the freedom of speech.
But you do not have the right to ignore the pilot's orders on the flight.
That is correct. Yes. That is correct. A couple lessons that I learned from this that we didn't talk about, they don't relate specifically to interviews, but they're good things to have in life, is that there is a reason behind every rule. And so, we may not understand that. We may not even ever become aware of what that reason is, but rules exist for a reason. When you're in the business world in a company, what you need to remember, though, is that rules do not dictate morality. That means rules don't tell you where the line from right and wrong is. Clearly, United Airlines had a rule in place for a reason, and they enforced that rule, but it was a mistake. It was not right. And now the airline is actually changing that rule. They've already made the change that no longer can a customer be bumped to put an employee in the seat.
Oh, wow.
That was changed immediately. There's no rule against dragging customers off a plane bloody. They can still do that, but they just cannot. Replace paying customers with employees anymore.
Wow, that's
So
interesting.
that's one thing I learned, and the other is just don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. That's kind of one of the sayings in the marketing world. Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Don't be afraid to when the truth catches up to you, own it, and use it to your advantage. And there's a lot of companies out there that say press, whether it's good press or bad press, is still press, and it's advertising. So it's brand awareness. However, in this case, I think they managed it so poorly that it's going to hurt their brand. But ultimately, the other airlines are jumping all over it, and they are building great brand loyalty as a result of United's mess up. Delta Airlines has offered, now they've raised the limits they can offer per passenger if they have to bump them. I think they went as high as $5,000.
Wow.
And on international flights, it's like $10,000 or $12,000. And they recently had an event. I don't know if it was before or after this, but Delta had 17 passengers. In fact, it has been since this event. Delta had 17 passengers that were bumped because of storms. No fault of theirs at all. And they offered those 17 passengers $1,350 each to voluntarily give up their seats. 17
for a storm.
For a storm.
That's crazy.
And that's so that things would move forward smoothly. Again, they spent a lot more and had a lot more at stake here, and it wasn't even their fault. Whereas United Airlines didn't seem to care. They just enforced their rules and said, we have a right to do this, and come hell or high water, we're going to get you off this plane. And
now, recently, there was something in the news as well with it. I don't remember which airline it was, but did you see the news about there was a girl who was flying on a buddy pass, and they had the strict policy for the clothing on the buddy pass. And so she was told they couldn't board the flight because they were wearing leggings, which did not meet the policy for a buddy pass.
That's right. And there was somebody on board that flight or in the area that was famous who videotaped, or I guess she didn't videotape, she posted, tweeted about the incident, and a lot of celebrities picked up on it. And you will never guess which airline it was. It was United.
Oh, no. Too bad press. And what was that, the same month?
Yes. And that's the other thing is when you get to a pattern like this, they've got their hands full. Yeah. And I think as late as yesterday or today even, apparently another passenger was stung by a scorpion on board a United Airlines plane.
Oh, wow.
So it continues for them.
United Airlines is not having a good year.
No.
Now, I wonder, I'm thinking about this now, a lot of airlines are maybe raising their prices, like you said, for kicking people off, but do you think that will lead to some people maybe, I don't know, trying to make the most out of getting kicked off an airplane? Do you think people will insist on a higher price just because they're aware of that?
Yeah, that has always been the concern. If you've ever been, and I've often been in a gate area where they've said we've overbooked the plane, we're looking for volunteers, and they start at $400, and everybody just sits there and waits. Nobody goes up, and then they say, okay, well, we're offering now $600. Maybe one goes up, but a few more wait, and when it gets up to about 800 or 1,000, then you see the line form. In fact, I've been in that line, but by the time I got there, they had already had too many volunteers, and I didn't get the $1,000. There are certain hub airports. Phoenix is one of them that I usually fly out of often. Southwest Airlines has their hub there, and on any given weekend, if you want to get a free flight, just book on Southwest out of Phoenix, and you will get the chance to get a free flight.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, this situation was a case where the company's employees, not even the company's employees, but somebody under the company made the mistake, and the company had to react to the mistake. So who would be responsible if, let's say, you work at McDonald's and one of your employees does something incredibly offensive, maybe makes a racial comment or kicks some poor kid in the face? I don't know.
Well, that has recently happened, and there was even a false allegation made against Whole Foods. Remember that a woman accused him of writing a homophobic message on a cake, and it was actually proven that she was lying. But the owner of the company, the president of the company, stood behind his employees until he knew. And in this case, you see, there was no doubt. They knew. They knew what had happened. It was videotaped, and there was no denying it. You could sit there and you'd come back later with the reasoning behind it after your investigation or who is guilty. But the CEO, Mr. Munoz, should have stepped up immediately and said, we are responsible for this. This should not have happened, and we apologize. And it's just that simple. In the case of McDonald's, the minute you become aware of it in upper management, you need to react. The timing is everything. And again, you can imagine that it's going to be videotaped and it's going to be on the internet. You can pull up the stuff every day. And so immediate reaction is necessary. And you can't stop short of the top. It has to be the CEO. You know, there's a spokesman now that's putting out press releases for United Airlines and nobody cares. What matters is what came from the CEO himself.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think about all the times I've been to a restaurant and there was some simple mistake with the food. Maybe there was a piece of hair on the steak or they forgot something. And anytime the waiter or waitress just went above and beyond and said, oh, here's a free dessert for your trouble, or, I'm going to take this off the menu, or not off the menu, but off the bill. This will be free. Right. That just seems to make you think, oh, wow, this restaurant is so great. And that little decision that host or hostess makes, or the waiter or waiter makes, can make or break your experience at that restaurant. And then you'll have a wonderful Yelp review or you'll have a terrible Yelp review.
Right. And you'll go back because you have the confidence that you'll be taken care of there regardless what happens. And you've quickly forgotten that there was a hair on your food because you remember the treatment you got from the person. It's all about relationship. And that is the secret. People make mistakes, things go wrong. You step up and make it right.
What about, I'm trying to think of an even more difficult example. What if someone in their resume told a little bit of a lie? And now that we've got LinkedIn, now that we've got Facebook and all of these ways that we can track, so now that you can be tracked, I wouldn't recommend lying on your resume, but let's say that happened and somebody found out there was a lie. Is there any coming back from that mistake? I doubt it
because that shows dishonesty, and that's something that nobody wants in an employee, unless they're a shell cover for some mob group or something. But I would recommend that if that were to happen, that you assess the situation, you evaluate what went wrong, and you learn from your mistake and be ready for the next time. Because you just can't recover from lies. And I would never, ever, ever recommend to anybody enhancing your resume to the point of lying and misrepresenting yourself. That is not anything you want to do.
Sure. So the rule seems to be never lie, and when you do make a mistake, be quick to
own up to it. Yeah.
I think we're just going to take a couple more minutes. Why don't you guys, if there's anybody here that has some questions, it doesn't have to be about United. It could be about interviewing. It could be about, the hotel industry. It could be about, any HR related question if you're looking for a job. Okay, let's see. What is your professional suggestion regarding LinkedIn social media? Should we post all the experience and education? I guess the question is, should we post all of our experience and education on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah, social media is very powerful nowadays, and you need to use it as a tool. And LinkedIn is the best and the brightest of all of them. So get out there and fully represent yourself as best you can. It's, you're marketing yourself. You need to put everything you can on there to make yourself attractive to those that are going to look at you. And when you're competing for good positions in the world, LinkedIn, I guarantee you, they're going to look there and see, what they see about you, as well as other places like Facebook and Twitter and WeChat. They're going to look at all of them.
Sure. Should we put our social media links like Facebook and LinkedIn on our resume?
That's a good question, and I would say no. It's so easy to search. I can find anybody I want to on Facebook or LinkedIn. So I wouldn't suggest that, and that may change. To be honest with you, that answer may change over time, but right now I wouldn't mess with it. You just want contact information so they can find you.
Sure. And I would say, definitely when you are applying, go through your Facebook and your LinkedIn and make sure everything on there is something you want representing you. Take off all the posts of the funny stuff you did while you were drunk. Take that all off there, because that's not what they're going to be considering. And I've met actually some companies now that are doing like a background check. They will do a social media background check on behalf of the company. So that's pretty important. Okay, let's see. Should we put our social media for international students, should we use our English name or our Chinese in the resume, or a combination of them?
Well, that's a really good question. I would like to see your real name, but it's nice to have the combination so that I know that I can talk to you comfortably in an interview situation. But I don't want you to hide from your Chinese origin and what your name is. I mean, if you, this is a little crazy, but I watched a Star Wars movie last night. And if you ever watch the credits to Star Wars, I could not pronounce probably 90% of the names listed in those credits. I don't know what language they were, but they were not from America, at least originally. And so there's no reason to hide that name. I would put it out there. But I would also, I've seen some people put their name in quotes or list it separately right after. I would do both. I would do a combination.
Okay. And that actually brings up a question that I have. For me, this isn't very often a problem, but I think with international students, it might be where they meet someone and they don't know how to pronounce that person's name. If someone had a strange last name that they're not used to, what do you think would be the right way to, when you first meet that person in the interview, should you avoid saying their name? Should you ask, how do you pronounce your name? What would you recommend?
If you really cannot pronounce it, people love hearing their name. So it would be good to try and get be able to say it, at least in the interview. But you don't want to make too big of a deal because you don't want to be perceived as having a language barrier. So if you're anywhere close to being able to pronounce it, I would go for it and try and get some clarification and try it again, because people just subconsciously, they love to hear their name, and it will make them feel more comfortable with you in the interview process. It will put down some subconscious barriers that you need put down to really have a successful interview.
And maybe that would be a good situation to ask the admin or ask the secretary before the interview how it's pronounced.
Absolutely, yes. And do your research. Again, I always tell people this. You don't just research the company, but you research the person you're going to be meeting with if you can find out who it is. So know their background, know how they got to where they are, know everything. Check out their Facebook page, their LinkedIn page. You want to know everything you need to know about them.
Yeah, that's so true. Actually, I had an interview once, and I looked on the guy's LinkedIn page and found out he was into musical theater. And I was like, oh, wow, we instantly have something we could talk about. But
Exactly.
If I hadn't checked LinkedIn, I wouldn't have known to sneak that into the interview. So now that I knew, I made sure on the first question to say, oh, well, when I was in musical theater, I blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, you have to introduce that into the conversation. And yeah, if you don't do that research, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. You are half the interview, and you are interviewing them and the company as well. admittedly, a lot of interviewers are terrible and they don't give you the chance to ask very much or to speak openly. But if you get that opportunity, you're going to use that research that you made before going in there, and you're going to use it in your favor.
That's great. So now that you brought that up, we actually have a list of questions that Mark put together for us. That is a list of questions you can ask in an interview. And if you would like a copy of that list, please send a little chat right now with your email address, and I will forward that list to you. It's very helpful because I think one of the important parts of an interview is you have to show that you're interested in the company. So when they say, do you have any questions, you can't say no.
Right.
You have to be sure, but it's sometimes hard to know what to ask. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. And those are good questions. They are tried and true. And what you're trying to do, again, is you're trying to get the interviewer to open up and talk about themselves. The more they do that, the more comfortable they're going to be with you. They're not going to know why, but they're going to like you. So that's the goal. It goes beyond the technical side of the interview. You really want them to like you and to be comfortable with you. And so to do that, you break down the subconscious barriers by finding things you have in common with them, by eliminating anything that stands in the way between you. And so getting them to talk about themselves, everybody loves to talk about themselves. Everybody loves to hear their own name.
That is so true. Okay, awesome. What else do I want to tell you guys? So yeah, if you would like a copy of that, put in your email right now. If you don't feel comfortable putting your email on here, I will add an email that you can send us an email as well and let us know that you were on this webinar. Also, if you send us an email, we'll send you an email and let you know when our next webinar is going to be. We're going to be continually doing webinars, and also feel free to respond and say, what would you like to have a webinar about? What kind of topic would you like? And before we end, are there any more questions? Does anybody want to pick Mark's brain anymore about human resources, interviewing, hotels, what he thinks of China, anything like that?
Well, let me just add while they're thinking about that, United Airlines is probably the best airline to fly right now because they're going to be on their best behavior. So I would think, don't shy away from United Airlines just because of what's happened. It was a bad incident where a couple people made bad decisions, but they make millions of decisions every day. I have no investment in United Airlines. They are not sponsoring me, but I will tell you that they're no better or no worse than any other airline out there. And I've been a frequent flyer on all the major airlines in the United States.
That's true.
It's just things go wrong, and it's all about how you handle them. And that's true of an airline. It's true about you. If things go wrong, it's all about how you handle it.
Absolutely. That is definitely, I think, the lesson that all of us have to learn. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is that everyone makes mistakes, like you said, and it's just important to know that you have the ability to do something after the mistake, and you can make it worse or you can make it better. And as you said, you guys made mistakes on purpose in the hotel industry. Are there any fun stories of something you guys did on purpose that we might want to hear about, or is that?
Oh, no, it's just little things like turning somebody's key off, or nothing major, just enough of an inconvenience that we had to have some kind of contact with them.
Okay.
And again, you want to create a service opportunity. If somebody comes and goes from your business and never has any interaction with you over a problem, then it's not memorable. And so the idea was to have a very small, calculated problem that we were allowed to respond to quickly and appropriately, and win them over as a faithful fan as a result of our action with them. So I don't know that I'd recommend that to too many operations. You got to be on your game. And we were on our game, and we were able to do it successfully. But most hotels I go to now, they just mess up without trying. So
Exactly. They don't have to add the mistakes in there. They come naturally.
That's right. It's just that's the nature of the world we're in right now. It's nothing against you in the workforce that are out there trying to get jobs, but the workforce is not as well trained as it used to be. and there are more mistakes. Maybe the world's more complex. I don't know, but things go wrong more often now. So get used to it, react to it properly, and keep your head about yourself. And just don't blame the guy you're dragging down the aisle.
Sure. We have one more question. As an international student, if we need sponsorship, when is the best time to mention this to the company?
We were asked that question recently at one of the events with HG Plus, and it depends. It depends on your relationship with that company. I wouldn't do it the first time you talk to them. I would do it after you have established some type of a relationship, a rapport with them, where they've already decided that you're worth having. That is generally going to be the rule. But there are going to be other companies that financial decisions are the issue from the start, and that's what makes all their decisions, and you need to be upfront about it if they ask.
Sure.
One of the questions they ask, are you legally able to work in the United States? If they ask that question, you need to be honest about it and say, yes, with this visa. And I'm looking for someone to sponsor me to do that.
Now, if they, in the job description, if they specifically state that you must already, I forget how they word it to be legal, but if they state that you must not need sponsorship, would that be a situation where you should not even bother to apply if you need sponsorship?
No, job descriptions are written and then they get filed away in a computer and then they get posted every time they need it. People probably don't even know what they post when they post most job descriptions. So I would ignore most of what's there. If you see a job description that interests you, pursue it. Even if it says that, issues like relocation or whatever. I've applied for many of those like that. And I've gotten the interviews and they've really liked me because they don't remember what they wrote in the job description.
Sure.
So,
all right.
Don't let that scare you away.
Cool. Well, I guess that we should go ahead, and that'll be it for today for our second webinar. Thank you guys for coming. Mark, thank you for being a part of our webinar today.
Thank you for your questions.
Oh, yeah. And we'll look forward to the next webinar. And you guys, please send us an email, info@hgplus.com. Let us know what you want to hear about next. Who should we invite to our webinar, and what kind of questions would you like us to ask them? And we will try to taken care of. And we will see you at the next webinar. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.